in our previous pizza cutter video, all we did really was make a simple single part model of what looked like a pizza cutter, which would be useful for perhaps showing to stakeholders or for creating a block model out of foam and card. If we wanted to create a more realistic model that had perhaps more detail, that was assembled in a similar way to a commercial pizza cutter, we'd need to do it as a series of different components that were then assembled. So this next set of tutorials are going to look at how we would do that. This first tutorial is going to look at making the 3 body components. So let's make a start. I'm in my folder for all of my pizza components. So I'm going to create a new document. And I'm going to call this one main body. So after a brief pause, we'll go into the design window and we can start to model. Now in an assembly, it's important that we try to, if we can, get the parts in the right orientation to fit together. We can manipulate them once they're in an assembly, but that takes a little bit of time, and if we're trying to be as efficient as possible when we're modeling, when we're designing, we start to think about how the parts will go together. So we're going to create this first part from the front work plane. So right click on front work plane, left click on new sketch, right click out of the way so that we can go to normal view on sketch plane. Now we're going to use the ellipse tool, which is found under the circle tools, to create the body shape. But to help guide us in that, we're actually going to use a couple of straight lines. So I'm going to draw a vertical line from the origin and a horizontal line from the origin. And I'm going to dimension those 10 millimeters and 6 millimeters. I can zoom in then with the mouse wheel. I'm now going to use the ellipse tool to draw an ellipse. So I'm going to start with the center at the origin, click on the vertical line to get the height, click on the horizontal line to get the width. I'm now going to trim away those 2 lines because we don't need those as part of the sketch. I could add in dimensions back onto that if I wanted to. And if I didn't want the sketch to change if I was editing it later on, I might want to do that. But for the moment, I'll trust that it's the right size. Now the body isn't going to be a solid part. So if we extrude this, we'd end up with a solid component. It's actually a tube, a thin wall tube. So I'm going to use the offset tool to click on the outline of the ellipse. Just zoom out slightly by using the scroll wheel on the mouse. But I want the line to be on the inside, and I want the distance to be 0.5 millimeters. So I just double clicked on the dimension, typed in 0.5, and then pressed enter. So now I can extrude this shape. So I'm going to use the extrude tool. I'm going to change the distance to 72 millimeters. If I press tab, it'll update. And it's coming out of the screen. I want it to go in the other direction just to make the next bits a little bit more easy. So let's change the direction, click on the tick, and that effectively is that part created. So I'm going to go back to Onshape, and you'll see that the main body has been created there. I'm going to right click on that, and I'm going to select copy workspace, and I'm going to give this the name of the guard end. Click on OK, and we should find that we now go into a new workspace with a part called guard end. So this is using the same sketch, the same features as we had with our main body, but this is a different document now, so we can edit this document without affecting the first one. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to right click on the extrude, and I'm going to edit that extrusion, and I'm going to change the distance from 72 millimeters to 9 millimeters. Click tick, and you can see that it's changed. I'm now going to right click on extrude, and I'm going to click on edit sketch 1, and I'm just going to scroll in with the mouse, and I'm going to use the trim tool just to delete the inside line. Click on the tick, and you can now see that this part is now solid. Now I don't want it to end up being solid, but we're going to use another feature in a moment to hollow it out. What I do want to do though is to put a radius on this end first of all. So we're going to use the fillet tool, and we're going to change the dimension to 2 millimeters, and then click on that edge and click the tick. So if I just spin that around with the right mouse button, you can see we've got a nice fillet on there. Now we want this to be hollowed out, or shelled out, to use the technical term. So we're going to use the shell tool, and we're going to set the distance to 0.5. So this will hollow everything out from the surface that we select, which is going to be this one, leaving just 0.5 millimeters all the way around. So if I click on that surface, it gets hollowed out. I click on the tick. If I spin that around, basically the whole of the inside is 0.5 millimeters smaller than the outside edge, but we've got this big cavity, if you like. I'm going to use the right mouse button to spin that around so I can select this surface. I'm going to right click and click on New Sketch. And I'm going to right click and go View Normal to Plane. Now on here I'm going to create a center rectangle slot. So select the center rectangle, line it up with the origin, and drag that out. This is now going to be dimensioned so that we can have the correct size slot. So we use the dimension tool, and it wants to be 2 millimeters wide and 10 millimeters high. Now the important thing to bear in mind here is if we were making some components that had to fit together as physical components, if what we were fitting in the hole that we're about to make was 2 millimeters by 10 millimeters, we'd need a little bit of clearance. So we might need to make the slot 2.1, 2.2, maybe 2.3 millimeters wide, and perhaps 10.2, 10.3 millimeters high. But because we're just going to assemble this at the moment as a CAD model, we don't need to worry about that clearance. So there's our sketch. We're now going to have another feature, and we're going to remove material. And if we just spin that through, we can see that it's gone through with the default 25 millimeters, but we could change that just to up to next. Click the tick, and we've got the part done. If we now go back to our menu, it might take a short while for the sketches to update, but we're now going to make a copy of guard end. So we're going to right click on guard end, and we're going to go copy workspace, and we are going to call this part the hook end. Click on OK, and that should then take us through to the workspace with our new part. So you can see up here it's now called hook end, not guard end, and we're basically going to edit the sketch that we've just created. So I'm going to right click on extrude to, and we're going to go edit sketch 2, and right click and view normal to the sketch. So it's going to spin us around. We're actually looking on the inside, not the outside, but that doesn't matter. We are going to cut away the elements of that sketch, and we're going to replace that with a circle. So we're going to go to a center point circle. We're going to line it up with the origin, and above the origin we're just going to drag out a circle, and we are now going to dimension the circle. The diameter we're going to make 2.1, and from the origin to the center of the circle. Now we actually want this to fit in with another part, the centers to be 13 millimeters apart. Now if we weren't very good at maths, we could actually put 13 divided by 2 in here and hit enter, and the software will do the maths for us. Of course, you're all bright, you can probably work that out quite quickly, but sometimes you might have something that's a little bit more complicated, and it's worth knowing that if you put a formula into a dimension box, it will work out as long as you put the correct formula in, of course. I'm now just going to click the tick, and we can see that it's created a hole just using the extrude that was already there. We edited the sketch, but it performed the same function on that sketch, i.e. it cut a hole, but we want another hole down the bottom, so we're going to add in an extra feature. So we're going to use the mirror tool. Defaults to part mirror, We're going to change that to feature mirror. We're going to click on extrude to as the feature, click on the mirror plane, and then we're going to click on the edge of that work plane, and it puts another hole down there. Click the tick, and then we can scroll that round with the right mouse button, and that is now our hook end completed as well.